Hey guys. Okay, so pardon for my state of undress and my weird hair. I can't wear sleeves yet. So the topic today is kind of about allergies or disabilities or autoimmune disorders. And the reason I wanted to talk about them was just because they're making themselves felt in my own life right now. And I know for a lot of people out there, it can be scary to find out that you have this limiting factor in your life suddenly. A lot of people, autoimmune disorders come on very quickly, very suddenly, and it's very disconcerting because a lot of people who are starting to have these allergies and autoimmune disorders used to be perfectly normal. They could do anything they wanted to do. They could eat anything they wanted to eat. And, the only really limiting factor was like an accident or something. For instance, the cute little lady that lived down the street from us back in Idaho, she was in her late 70s, maybe early 80s, and she started to have these strange symptoms, and she went into her doctor. And at the age of 80, she was diagnosed with celiac disease, and she was raised right next door to wheat farms. And her family had been wheat farmers for generations. And now here she is suddenly allergic to wheat and having to change her whole diet and kind of even change her whole life paradigm. And so most people out there have a relative or a friend or have themselves been affected by these disorders that are kind of a modern, I don't know what to call it, the modern plague almost. And so as somebody who's dealt with something like this their whole lives, I kind of wanted to come in and say, your life isn't over. Your capacity for health and happiness are changed a little bit by this, but they're not, you have a capacity for more life and abundance and health and happiness than you can imagine. And I do think that, at least for those of us kind of in the front row of that, those who've had the first series of autoimmune disorders that are happening, I believe that we can be a blessing to others who are coming in future generations, because hopefully we can show and signal to the world that some of the processes we're using, some of the materials that we're using, some of the things we're doing to food currently are really a bad idea, and that we need to stop. We need to turn around and we need to investigate more the results of some of the chemicals we're using on our foods, some of the things we're using in manufacturing processes, some of the things that we're, some of the foods that we're actually creating at this stage might actually have really serious consequences for future generations. So, just to give myself, are you watching, honey? Yeah. Just to give myself some credibility and to share a little bit about my journey with this, I was born with mercury toxicity. My mom had had amalgams, which are mercury fillings, when she was pregnant with me, and she was really, really sick from them. She had root canals and all sorts of metal work that had been done in her mouth. And mercury does cross the placental barrier, and I ended up with a pretty good load of it by the time I was born. And then my mom had me on my full spectrum of immunizations as a baby and as a child. And when I reached the age of 5, I reacted so badly to that immunization I received as a 5-year-old that I started to have hallucinations. And I'd already had asthma as a child, but about the age of 5, I started to have hallucinations, high fevers, and my asthma got so bad that I was constantly in a state of alert. My mom always had to be in a constant state of alert because I was allergic to everything. I was allergic to everything under the sun, and my reactions were always very scary. I had to learn how to teach myself how to throw up when I was 5, because at any given moment I could eat something that could kill me, and I needed to be able to know how to get rid of it quickly. And so any of you who have not heard of Hal Huggins, if you know that you or maybe your mother has had a history with amalgam fillings, Hal Huggins, he wrote a book called It's All in Your Head, talking about the amalgam fillings have on people's health. And I was the oldest of 7 children, and the rest of my siblings were perfectly normal. None of them had the same allergies or issues that I did. And Hal suggests that the eldest child of a woman who is mercury toxic from amalgam fillings is the one who gets the mother load of all that mercury. And so, let's see, I actually have notes today. Anyway, as a child, one of the reasons my parents actually started homesteading was because they were desperately trying to find a way to feed me safe food and have me in an environment that was controlled enough that I could live a somewhat normal life. They lived on a homestead where everything we did was organic. There were no sprays. We had goats, we had cows, so we ate our own meat. We had our own milk. My mom grew an enormous garden. We had fruit trees and orchards. And I think the reason that a lot of people come to homesteading is because of health concerns, whether it be for yourself or for your children. And I think you know, a lot of people do homesteading for personal freedom reasons. They just want to know where their food comes from. But I don't think I know of very many families that it wasn't some kind of health crisis or something like that that led them to homestead. So let's see if we can get over here.
Jenny Combs says she's in the hospital right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because of autoimmune diseases.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to make sure and say before I forget is that we are going, is it the 11th of March? We will be with Deep South Homestead in Mississippi, and it's Stone County, I believe. So you should go over to Facebook to Deep South Homestead and look up their event page. Even with Deep South Homestead, the reason they homesteaded was because of a crisis. Danny's wife, then wife, not Wanda, Danny's wife had cancer, and he did research and he found out what was happening with the food streams and what was going on in medicine, and he wanted to heal his wife of her cancer. And he started this homestead where he could grow her food and he could protect her. And he has a really beautiful long story that goes with that. But now he had a health crisis. He had the strain of having his wife be so ill led to him having some health problems that are now addressed by his homestead. He has to be very careful about what he eats. They grow their Danny corn. They grow their acres of greens. They raise their own pasture pigs, and they just got dairy goats. And so if you guys are interested in being with a lot of like-minded people, March 11th is when we will be down there, and we will be having a get-together with them. So Wanda, if I forgot anything, that's how that works. Have more farms said, did you ever get heavy metal chelation? I did get chelation at one point when I was in my teens. It was part of a protocol that was called EPD, enzyme potentiated desensitization shots, and they were from Canada, and they actually worked. At that point in my teens, I could not be exposed to water. I could not be exposed to dirt, and whether it be in a lake or whether it be in a swimming pool, I could not be exposed to water. We think that the reason for that was because a lot of the chemicals that are used by boats will actually float on the water. And when I was a teenager, there was not as much regulation about what could be put into a lake. And so that rainbow film that you see on the top of water in lakes is a slick of chemicals. And so I couldn't put my feet in stream. I couldn't put my feet in dirt, and I was allergic to my own sweat. And so my parents found this treatment in Utah. The doctor was Dr. Remington. If you look up Dr. Remington in Provo, Utah, we did go to him when I was 15. and I had these shots once a month that I would go to. And I was put on a very special diet where anything that was prone to cause allergic reactions was eliminated from your diet. And you would receive the shots. And then after a certain period after your shots, you were supposed to start bringing in very tiny amounts of foods you were allergic to so that you became desensitized to them. You're eating them in very small amounts to re-expose yourself to them. And that is a principle I still use to this day a lot. If I know that I'm allergic to something and it's not a chemical, I will reintroduce myself to it in very tiny amounts. I won't restrict it 100% from my diet, but I will be exposed to it in very small amounts, and it helps me to not have such a large reaction over time. But that was because I was taking the EPD shots. I was able to kind of undo some of that messed up way that my body read food. However, I don't think that they are allowed to administer that shot in the US anymore. It seems like when things really work, when they're really effective, they're told to stay out of the country. It seems like a lot of US medicine doesn't look for what's effective, it looks for what makes the most money. And these shots were very effective, but they were not a huge money maker. So
you watching the chat?
How to Homestead with Scarlett Danon said, just want to toss him how much I love your show by sharing your story, making such a big difference to so many. Thank you. Oh, you're so sweet. So let's see if I can get through the rest of the story and then we'll talk. So I did the EPD shots, and I did not know at the time that I had never had a filling in my life. My mom was really careful with what we ate. We were not allowed to eat sugar. We didn't eat candy. We didn't eat any kind of sugar. We could have honey. We ate whole foods only as kids. My mom was very health conscious. And so I didn't have any cavities ever. I still don't have any cavities. And so I had never received an amalgam filling. And yet I was having a terrible time with digestion. I was having a terrible time with depression as well in my early 20s, and had since I was probably 15. And we went actually to Hal Huggins' protocol. We did Hal Huggins protocol, but we had to go to Canada to do it. So I went to Canada when I was 22 or 23. And it turned out that I had cavitations where my wisdom teeth had been pulled. And so I had pockets of dead tissue in my where my wisdom teeth had been that had never filled in and grown back healthily. And I had to go out and have those cleaned. And at that time, he put me on a protocol, which was that I needed to be out in the sunshine every day as much as I possibly could be. I needed to not exercise until I sweat. I could sweat if I was in a sauna, but I was not allowed to exercise because he said that if you already have autoimmune disorders and you overexercise, you're exhausting the resources that your body has to be able to fight your condition, and instead you're developing new autoimmune disorders because you're exhausting your body's resources. So anything I did, I had to do in short bursts so that I wasn't getting fatigued. And so I did that. I was a very Christian, good girl, and it really bothered me how much time I had to spend out in the sun. But he wanted me to expose as much of my skin to the sun as possible for as long as I could without burning, obviously. And so I started sunbathing, and I was so careful about what I ate. High fat, high protein, and I couldn't eat wheat. He made me cut wheat out of my diet. We've been eating a lot of whole wheat, whole grain food up to that point. And I started to get better. I stopped being crazy. Although John would probably say I have my own brand of crazy now.
Why do you always put words in my mouth?
I do have my own brand of crazy. I know that I do have my own brand of crazy.
Over there nodding and...
I know I have my own brand of crazy. Anyway, I got better. I got way better. For the first time in my life, I could leave home, and I didn't need to have my mom on speed dial to say, okay, this is what I'm reacting to now. What should I do? I was able to be independent. I was able to go to school. I had a job. And that was a point where I met John, and John and I got married. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And the way that we got from point A to point B wasn't that we had brilliant doctors, even though we did. The way that we got from point A to point B to where I could function was that my mom had been monitoring and keeping actually in my journal, had been keeping a journal of all the things that bothered me and the things that seemed to help. And she kept that from the time that I was a baby until now. And she was the one who made it so that I could have healthy, vibrant life that I have now. And the reason why I kind of named this the way that I did is that it's a blessing in disguise, is that even though the rest of my brothers and sisters didn't have these problems, there are so many people out there that are starting to have these problems. And I think they cross paths with so many other issues that are happening today. For instance, my little nephew on John's side is autistic. And they found that when they took him off of wheat, when they took him off of refined grains and that kind of thing, that he was manageable and that he was happy, and he is a brilliant reader. He's an amazing little boy, but they needed to change his diet away from the standard American diet in order to have him be as functional as he can be. Another thing is that my two youngest brothers, when they were really young, I think one was 15 and one was 13, or maybe it was 11 and 13, they were hit by a truck. They were T-boned by a truck on their way to school, and they both received head trauma from the airbags. And then my older little brother ended up having 10 inches of his large intestine had to be removed because his internal organs were damaged. And so even though he didn't start out having these food sensitivities, now he has to be very careful with how he eats, and his damaged organs manifest as an autoimmune disorder. And so my mom is able to use what she learned about what was going on with me and then use it to heal my little brother, who's now very functioning, even with some of the problems that he has because of his accident. He is a blessing to his family, and is just a wonderful kid. And my youngest little brother went through a really rough time after his accident, and still blesses our family by his presence. He doesn't have the same kind of digestive problems that my other brother does, but I think the understanding you receive from autoimmune disorders helps you to kind of transfer over to things like brain trauma, to be able to have understanding of people who have different needs. Let's see. So currently in our little homestead situation, we are working to get a little backyard garden and homestead put together. And I think it's really important, even if you don't have the space that you think you need to produce all your food, I think it's really important to feel some kind of power, some kind of choice in the food that your family can eat, even if it's in a very small space. I think it's very empowering. And in my opinion, I feel like when you start to move towards a solution, then the solution is placed in your path. But if you're not moving, no solution is given you because you're not in action. And yeah, honey.
Well, Alberto Pinto has got a great suggestion. He says find the alkaline vegetables and avoid sugar.
Yes, and I think in your purchasing, it makes a huge difference to be able to purchase organic. I will say that, at least in my instance, the difference between what organic says on the label and what I can actually produce at home is they're so far apart from each other.
Well, he's saying get alkaline vegetables, not necessarily organic, but the pH has changed since Monsanto and the GMOs and everything. You know but the spinaches. Correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the gardener. But the spinaches, the very alkaline vegetables, have not been necessarily hybridized or GMO'd to the point that they're poison.
There's a lot of heritage seeds out there that you can use that will have more nutrition in them. But at the same time, what you grow them in makes a difference. What is your soil like? What is your water like? Who was it I was listening to the other day? If you've ever heard of David the Good, he's here on YouTube, and he is a composting genius in Florida. And what he says is that he was even having problem with yard waste fertilizer, compost, because people spray their lawns and then they send that to the composting facility that this city does. And so you even with that kind of sourcing, you never really know. The first nasty thing I put on my property was straw. I thought, oh, it's mulch, it'll work. And it turns out that the pesticide residues on my straw actually killed my fruit trees that I had planted. And so when you go down this rabbit hole and you start to worry about your own health and you start to grow your own food, you learn so much about what really surrounds us commercially and how much the world is really run by money, not by concern for people's welfare, that I wouldn't say that it necessarily makes you paranoid. But when you meet homesteaders, we have a tendency to be a very paranoid bunch of people about the specific way that we choose to raise our own food. David the Good has a story about he bought organic manure from a friend, but it turned out that the friend had sprayed some weeds that with something that was safe for the cows to eat, but when the cows ate the sprayed weeds, that spray went through the intestines of that cow and came out still toxic on the other end. And so when he made compost with it, it ended up killing all of his tomatoes. Those kind of stories. And so even though I don't make compost and I build in a raised bed system, I don't use commercial. I try really hard not to use straw. I used to. I used straw bales for a while in straw bale gardening, but I found that it never thrived the way that it did in other mediums. And I think that's just because of the pesticides and the chemicals. I now plant on top of big pieces of wood. And if I know where wood chips came from, I'll use wood chips. But usually what I use, if I am going to use straw, it's coated in goat manure. And even better, it's already started to degrade and it has mold on it, because I found that any kind of fresh straw that hasn't been treated with huge amounts of manure or that isn't already being eaten up by mushrooms has a tendency to kill things. Yeah, Wholesome Rat said manure can cause herbicide damage for sure. Yeah, it's true. And so I think it's one of the reasons why this kind of thing is so important. David the Good, he has, oh, sorry, I just really want to itch. I can't itch. David the Good has audiobooks, and he has a book that says compost everything. And his principle is the principle that I use, except that I use mine inside frames, and I compost in place and plant on top of them in a raised bed system rather than down on the ground. And in there, he has a whole chapter that talks about why he makes his own compost, because of, you know, people want to have pretty lawns. They do. They want to have pretty lawns. They don't want to have dandelions, and they don't want to have weeds coming up in cracks in their sidewalk. And yet, where do we think those chemicals go when there's rain? It goes into our soil. It goes into our drainage systems. It goes into our rivers. Hence the reason why in the 80s, 90s, and probably the teens, I still couldn't get in a river. Hopefully we're more careful than we used to be, but I don't think we are. So this isn't supposed to be like a defeatist type live stream. Instead, it's about, this is the reality that we live in. And I do think there's a way to be healthy and happy and have huge success. I know, I'll explain it the way that my mom always explained it to me, is you have building blocks, and your health is like a pyramid. You have basic blocks that are ways that you put strain on your body, blocks, the base blocks down here. And then there's 4 blocks up here and 3 blocks and 2 blocks and 1 block. At whatever point you have so much of a strain on your system that you put that last block on and the whole pyramid falls and your health crashes, that's how you get an autoimmune disorder. And so the sooner you can start to protect your health by eliminating those things that are a stress on your system, the better. For me, you usually see me, I can really function. I can function really, really well. And I can be exposed to things that I'm allergic to without having a big catastrophic health event. If I ignore my building blocks, knowing that I always have pretty much a base layer, I always have a base layer because I am still mercury toxic. We are constantly exposed to mercury in our environments. And there's chemicals out there that we're constantly breathing and is on our skin just because we're in a modern world and that's what we're being exposed to. And that's okay. My body can handle that. But if then I decide that I'm going to spend 5 days in a row in a swimming pool with my kids, in a swimming pool full of chlorine, then it means that for the next, what are we working on now? Week and a half? Week? It's been a full week since the last time I went, and I'm still covered in hives, and I cannot put a shirt on. Because the fabric aggravates my skin so much. And I haven't had a reaction like this in a really, really, really long time.
Can I jump in there? Well, and I think part of what we did, one of the mistakes we made was we ignored that cardinal rule of just ease into it piece by piece. I mean, we went every day.
We went every day.
6 days straight.
And I don't know what you guys can see. I don't think they can see it. I don't think it's bright enough.
You're not showing up.
I've got welts. The hives are, unless I've scratched all the skin off of them, you can't even see them.
Oh, yeah, they could see.
Can they see a little bit of them? I feel like I have chicken pox. Or shingles. It feels a little bit like shingles. Oh, you're funny. Yeah, and S. Ward said, don't forget the fluoride in city water. Exactly. Hey, Cammy's Tiny House Living, how are you? So those are the ones that you can see. I've got more everywhere. But everywhere. What was it I was saying before you started talking? Oh, right. And so I was just like, I wanted to see if I was going to have a reaction. I wanted to just hop in and have fun with my kids. We've been cooped up in the little house because it's cold outside, and I just wanted to play with my kids. And so now I've given myself a major reaction, and nothing is working because I've overwhelmed my liver, and so stupid. There's nothing to say except stupid. Holly AR75 said, Julie, are you avoiding the city water there? What do you drink? I have not been avoiding it. I have been taking showers and drinking that water. We have been boiling it for tea, but we do need to now switch over to a filter because it does appear that I am now reacting to the chlorine in the water. And again, it's just a learning experience. I'm a little hesitant to have the girls in the pool as much now as I did before because they are a little itchy. If everybody else wasn't so itchy, I think that I was being attacked by vampire bed bugs. But the rest of my family is also a little itchy. They just don't have the welts, which, yeah, they're itchy, but only like here and there and mildly and for a little while. And so that otherwise I would seriously think that I was being eaten alive by some invisible bed bugs. Flying VS Farm said, got rid of almost all plastic, stopped using conventional beauty products. Wish I could get rid of my electronics altogether, going back to living the way my ancestors did. Right? The Have More Farm said, everyone must use a water filter in their house. That is a no-brainer. Wholesome Root said, I want a Berkey so bad. Our city water is so gross. Baby Brown said theirs could be from the chlorine drying out their skin. Well, exactly. And also chlorine does the same thing to our skin that it does to organisms. It actually bursts cell membranes on like organisms that would be in a warm city pool. And our skin is alive. And so it does the same thing to our skin. It doesn't just dry it out. And so
yeah, it is chemically,
it is chemically opening cells
there to destroy
living tissue. So the way that I work through my issues again is that when I'm in a good place, I will take very tiny amounts of whatever it is I generally react to and keep it bouncing in and out of my diet. And I have to be on the paleo regimen. I eat a lot of meat, a lot of vegetables, and we are trying to have organic vegetables. We do much better with our own homegrown vegetables than even organic. Yes, honey?
Alex at Homestead with Scarlet Damon says, Julia, I recommend trying fresh white pine needle tea.
Interesting. I haven't tried that.
Where do we get fresh white pine needles?
Well, I think we had them back home. The adventurous Aardvark said that heated pool water can have a skin bacteria. Yes, it can have a skin bacteria. And
MRSA?
I don't know. Yes, and we did look into that, but the odds that it is actually the chlorine are very high because chlorine has always been one of my main allergens, and I've never exposed myself to that much of it all at once before. And again, nobody else is having the same problem that I am. They're just having a tiny little bit of an itch here and there. And so I used to take a lot of Benadryl. When I was a kid, when I would have a reaction, I'd actually go into anaphylactic shock. This would have been such a minor reaction, I wouldn't have even noticed it. It wouldn't have fazed me at all. As a kid, I would have an allergic reaction where my throat would close, my tongue would swell, and then I get these enormous welts all over my body. And I don't have that anymore. So I'm making progress. And the amazing thing now is I don't even have any sign of any kind of asthma. My skin is reacting. Most likely I have a congested liver that needs some help. But lately my mom has been trying to help me because I used to take Benadryl, not frequently, but it was my go-to because I would have life-threatening reactions, and it did work to pop me out of it. But
now she's resisting.
Now I'm resisting because it's hard on my kidneys to take Benadryl, and I don't like that it's shoving the reaction down inside of me. I want to cleanse my liver, not push the histamine down. And I want to be more aware of why I'm having a reaction instead of pushing against it and trying to live exactly the way I want to without listening to my body. I think I think it is a gift when your body's reacting to these chemicals and saying, no, this is poison. Why don't we listen? Poison is poison is poison, and with repeated exposure to it, what are we building up? What nasty thing are we actually building up in our body that may later manifest itself as an autoimmune disorder or even cancer or other things? And so I feel like those of us who have it early and have worked through it are like the canary in the mine that is saying, here there be poison. It's in our food system. Our food system is poisonous. A lot of what's happening to in agriculture and in lawns and in swimming pools, it's poisonous. Why are we doing this? Is it worth more to be able to swim in the winter than it is to protect your health? These are all questions I think that we have in our mind. I don't think there's necessarily an answer to it, but I think that it's good to be sensitive to the ramifications of whether or not we listen to our bodies.
So Gypsy Lee is asking, Julie, how are you with tea tree oil?
I use a lot of tea tree oil. A lot of it. I use a lot of it back home. Barbara Nelson said, remove the grains. You'll be surprised how much better you'll feel. So I do not eat grains, and we have not eaten grains for years. Lately, I've been trying to bring back in sprouted grains, and we have done very well with them. And again, I feel like there's something wrong with our food system, not wrong with our bodies. I think that I think you should be able to eat grains. I think you should be able to eat wheat. I think you should be able to eat dairy. And I feel like the reason that so many people are starting to not be able to eat those things is because, again, our food system has some wacky things going on. And I think there's a lot of things in our system that we're not aware are going on. And I think there's a lot in our food now that they tell us just the corner of what's happening and how our food is grown.
Well, they'll not tell. This is homesteaders getting together and
right,
talking,
being crazy.
Yeah, putting a tinfoil on. They won't say anything until
people start dying.
That people cannot ignore it. Oh, people will die left and right, but if it's a big enough deal finally that they just can't put a lid on it anymore, then it will come out. So Wholesome Roots, they're buying drinking water. He says, so a filter is probably cheaper. We are probably going to be buying water for a little bit as an interim.
On our whole trip, we bought water on our whole trip across the U.S. because we never knew what kind of water we'd be running into.
And it's, it's 40 cents a gallon, 90 cents a gallon, whatever. It's hard to justify a couple $100 for a filter when your bottled water, a couple of those a day will be $1.60. But
my mom uses a Berkey, and she really loves it. And across the board, everywhere that we went, it was Swamp Creek Cabin. They have a Berkey. My mom has a Berkey. The guy in the little caravan truck had a Berkey. Everybody has a Berkey, and they're supposed to do a really good job. If you want them to take out the fluoride and the chlorine, you have to get 2 additional filters, I believe. Now, somebody just said, Andrew Rushton said, well, as a rule, the farmers have to spray their fields. That's true. The farmers do. However, there are people out there who are growing on a family basis who have a small enough amount of acreage that they don't have to spray. They can manage it without spraying. John Martin Fortier, he did the Market Gardener, Stone, Curtis Stone. He farms in other people's front and backyards in, I think, Ontario. Is it Ontario?
It's up in Canada.
And he does not use sprays. He does organic farming. On our farm in Idaho, we did not spray anything. And we've gotten to a point where we didn't really like to bring straw in. And so we would use things like wood chips to bed the animals. So we were feeding our family off of our property. We fed our dairy. We had all of our vegetables. We had fruit from our trees. We raised rabbits and pigs and goats. I mean, we raised our own food, and we did it without chemicals. We used the fertilizer from our animals to feed our food, and then we took our food and fed it to our animals, and it was a beautiful cycle. And I think if you do it on a small enough basis and you learn as you go, you don't have to use the chemicals. Sacred Wonder Maine said, when testing, we get the water tested for many things. It costs about $150, which it's worth knowing. Yeah, exactly. Alberto Pinto said, I live in Argentina, and the agribusiness of soy is causing a tragedy because of glyphosate. Cancer is an epidemic.
I'm sure that it's just a random thing. There's no,
there's no connection.
No, nothing here. Move along.
Let's see. And so Flying VS Farm said there are chemical-free ways to keep pests under control. That is very true. An orchard out by us, the orchard that I grew up picking apples in, is 100% organic in every way. They have cows that graze underneath the trees in the summer. They eat all the extra fruit, and they keep the grass trimmed. And in the apples themselves, he released millions of what do they call the little red bug? Ladybugs.
Say again, millions.
So many. He had all these huge packages of ladybugs that he released into his orchard. And if you went out and watched the apples themselves, if there was a bug trying to get into an apple and you were watching it, a ladybug would come up behind it and reach in and pull the bug out of the apple and eat the bug. And there were all these spots on all these big, beautiful apples where there was a little tiny dent. And when you would cut the apple open, there was no bug in it. It healed itself after that bug was pulled out. I've never seen anything like it. And I've never had any apples that compared to those apples. And he used to actually have a CSA there in our little area of Idaho. He raised amazing chickens. He raised, he had a market garden with carrots that were the most wonderful carrots I've ever had. He had a Jersey cow, and then he had this fruit orchard. And when he did the CSA, there were so many people that didn't live up to their part of the bargain in paying him for his food throughout the year that he went, that business went under, and he wasn't able to do it anymore. And so I think coming down to being willing to, I gotta stop itching. Being willing to pay more for your groceries so that you can have something that isn't GMO, something that isn't sprayed with chemicals. But it does mean that you are paying somebody else to raise you something safe to eat. And is that worth it to you? Otherwise, are you willing to grow it yourself?
Becca made a comment a while back. There are chemical-free ways to keep pests under control. Exactly right. And that your apple orchard guy was one good example. The thing is, the chemicals like the Roundup that everybody's talking about right now, the glyphosate, it does not fix any actual problem. It doesn't kill any bugs, or it doesn't kill all the bugs long term, because they just mutate, and then they come back stronger, and they're resistant to stuff like Roundup and glyphosate and everything else. So we're just poisoning ourselves needlessly at this point.
Yeah. And I don't think that it's a hopeless situation. I think that we can be resilient. I just think that it means that we're going to break out in blotches until we figure out what the source of the poison is this time. And I honestly, I think the best thing is just to learn not to trust these guys that make money. I don't know. I don't think it's evil to make money is the thing. I don't think it's evil to try to support your family. But I think that there are certain companies that have proven that they're not trustworthy, that they really are only in it for the money. I think that there are those out there that have no concern for human suffering and human life. And I think that Monsanto has proven that they do not care. I think a lot of the pharmaceutical companies that are linked to Monsanto type, I mean, they're I don't know. I think it really comes down to our original freedoms, guaranteed under the Constitution. And I think it comes down to kind of our original responsibility to take care of our own families and to, I don't know. I think it just comes down to so many basic things that when we turn our own health over to somebody else to take care of, that they take care of it. They take care of it until you don't have money to pay for it, and then they just let you suffer. I don't know. I have some real what's the word? I have some real feelings. I have some real feelings about companies that are willing to poison us for money.
Okay, sorry. Danny points out glyphosate is an herbicide. It has nothing to do with bugs.
Very true.
True, but the same thing happens with plants, is they will become resistant to it, and they'll come back in a few generations anyway. So, my apologies, mistake.
So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And
does anybody have any happy stuff on the chat?
Sorry, my life is not necessarily terribly joyful right now. Anyway, what it comes down to is I think that I think it's always been that way. There will always be people that don't have your best interest at heart, and as much as you can do to take care of your own family, I think the better it is. And I'm not sure if I forgot to say anything. The seeds that I use, I think I have them down in the description. It's M.I. Gardner. And I do have a 10% code down there. He has heritage seeds there, and they're what I'm using lately. I have some of Danny and Wanda's seeds from Deep South Homestead that I hope I can get planted here this summer. And then I also use Strictly Medicinal Seeds. They have herbal medicinal seeds that they have at their farm, and I'm so itchy. I've got to get off. Yes.
Cammy's Tiny House Living is asking, what do you use in your lanterns? Hers can be kerosene or lamp oil.
I use both, don't I? No, I use propane and lamp oil. Because I use the propane one.
The kerosene, unless you do have a special lantern,
it stinks.
It smells of house.
So, exactly. BJ's Rage said, in the case of wheat glyphosate, it is used for the purpose of ripening the seeds all at once for harvest. And they do the same thing with peas and beans now. They want the vine to die so they can harvest the seeds and have them dry quickly, which means that if you're not buying organic, like split peas and beans, you're also getting glyphosate in those as well. And my understanding of the new laws is that if it says organic, that means it is also non-GMO, that in order for it to be labeled as organic, it also has to be non-GMO. And I know they were fighting over that for a really long time.
You can bail.
Yeah. So that, anyway, that at certain periods of my life, probably once a year, I'd pop up and do one of these. Oh my gosh, I'm crawling out of my skin. This is what I'm going to do about it.
So fun.
I did actually make notes on this, so I'm going to double check that I didn't forget anything.
So okay, so you have been so to help out, what helps with your symptoms?
What helps with my symptoms?
Showering.
Resting. For me, I don't think there's anything really universal for people except the principles of don't push yourself. Don't try to get around too many things that you react to all at the same time. Give your body some rest and some forgiveness that it always isn't going to be able to handle and function all the time, and that you have a limit to your energy, which is again why I love permaculture, because you can do the work and then it feeds you the rest of the time, and there's very little that you have to do.
Secret Wonders Maine says oatmeal bath, lots of water.
Except that I can't have oatmeal. I'm allergic to grains. So anyway, I still have all these things that I react to, but I manage it. I manage my exposure to certain things. I drink lots of water. I keep food that is safe for me to eat around me at all times if I possibly can. I make sure I don't get hungry so that I then am not forced to eat something that's going to make me sick. If I'm tired, I have to rest. And I've trained my children to be obedient and helpful. As they get older, we introduce new responsibilities to them that allow them to pick up the pieces and keep the house going when I'm having a bad time. And that has been paramount to our success in what we do. I have work I have to do in order to make a living, and so my ability to keep the house clean and keep meals on the table is sometimes compromised. But my kids can. Paige gets up and makes breakfast every morning. Kaya can do dishes. They both can take care of the chickens. And so when I'm having a really hard time, I have two other little human beings. When John is gone, I have two other little human beings who can do their own schoolwork without mom supervising. They can do their chores. They can cook. And I think that having the people around you be understanding, and if you have children, training them to be responsible is a huge part. Yes, honey?
Patrol has some organic products on the Etsy store.
That would be lovely. I would like to try some. Anything that will make it stop hurting. Hodgepodge Farm said Asana helped us, and avoidance, of course. Yes, during my huge sun exposure, don't exercise too much time in my 20s, I used a sauna almost every day. I used a dry sauna to sweat things out, and I did light exercise. Oh, I did have a video. So I made a video showing how I exercise. So if you guys have noticed that I bounce a lot in front of my computer like this, sometimes in a live show, I don't stop moving. It's because I use one of those big exercise balls to sit on. And when my lymph doesn't want to drain correctly, I can exercise very low impact exercise that tones my muscles, clears my lymph, and gets me a little more energetic. And that's how, as someone who cannot exercise to the point of sweating and exhaustion, I can't do that. I use my exercise ball to exercise while I edit videos, and it works really well for me. And I do have a video coming up of that, but last time I made a video like that, people got really upset because they thought it was suggestive. They thought it was suggestive that I was showing that I was bouncing on this ball while I was editing videos. They didn't like that. But I feel like it's important to show alternative ways of being and alternative ways of health. And so we'll see if I can figure out how to edit that video of me on the ball without people being offended. B-Lady says, Julie, we have bouncy ball chairs and love them. Aren't they wonderful? Brown Coat Homestead said, so true. They have a couple of great kids. Grumpy Toll said, I'll contact you through your Etsy store and make some recommendations. Thank you so much. Jennifer Phillaw said, Wholesome Roots, I don't think so, but his seeds are only 99 cents and with such good germination rate. Yes. The MI Gardener.
Yeah, they were asking if he did bulk seeds. If MI Gardener does.
I don't know if he does bulk seeds. I don't think he does, but yeah, the packets are 99 cents a piece. And I make my seed orders from him at $16 at a time. As the only problem is he sells out really quick. So by the time you get to March, most of his seeds are gone. I've made 3 orders from him so far in the last 6 weeks, because as I'm planning my garden out, I'm seeing I have holes, and I don't want to have to do without those seeds. He even has some really neat Chinese lettuce type plants that look amazing, where you use the stalk instead of the leaves, and you could feed the leaves to rabbits. Gypsy Lee said, Julie, have you tried moss clay for your skin? Yes, I did. When these first started breaking out, I had a face mask that had moss in it, and I put it on, and it was like heaven. It stopped hurting. But now I am covered in the hives. I'm absolutely covered in the hives. There's too much of me to cover with moss or with clay, and I'm worried it'll clog our shower anyway. So I'm not sure what to do about it. I'm not out of my mind with agony, but I do find that I have to keep myself really distracted in order not to go out of my mind a little bit. I'm hoping today I tried to go around with as little clothing on as possible so that I wasn't brushing against the hives.
Don't be suggestive.
I'm not being suggestive. I'm wearing a tank top. And I've been trying to see if that will help. I'm not sure if it's helping or not.
Punky Ruth. Okay.
Huh?
Oh, things are kind of funny at the moment. Who was it? Somebody asked. Okay, Bee Lady Apiary. Back to she asked what basically was causing this. So let's do a quick.
Who's asking?
Bee Lady. This is a ways back. She said what basically is causing this.
My liver is overloaded. I got in chlorinated water, which has always been a no-no for me, and I did it for several days in a row. So even though my health was at a peak, I was doing really, really well. The fact that I exposed myself to it so many times over a short period of time means that I have given myself a major reaction, even though I was at the best health that I've ever been in my life. And so, you can push it so hard that it makes you have a crash.
So it's just a reset time and something that we need to get through.
So Jennifer Filia said, I wonder if Moringa would help you, Julia. You know, I know Danny and Wanda used it at Deep South Homestead, and we saw a lot of people in Florida that used it. I've never used it before, so I don't know. Bee Lady Apiary said, Julia, is your throat swollen inside? No, I used to get anaphylactic shock where I would have the inside of my throat swollen, but this time, no, it's just a skin thing, which is why I'm trying to not take Benadryl or anything else. I'm trying to let it come out on its own, let my liver cleanse a little bit. I am on milk thistle and acetylcysteine and some other things to help. But mostly I'm just writing it out. I'm trying really hard to let it write out and teach myself a lesson not to do this again.
Yeah.
Just suffer enough. Maybe I'll never do it again.
Have fun again. Traces of a life? No, she is LH.
Past in time said filter your shower water too, besides using treated water like you drink. Well, exactly. My mom says that's what I need to do. She says we need to go get a $25 filter from Home Depot that will filter the shower water, because yes, every time I get into the shower, I'm re-exposing myself to chlorine. Every time I drink water, I'm re-exposing myself to chlorine. Yes, that is very true.
Past in time says yay, milk thistle.
Trace of life, am I RH negative? I don't remember. I think I'm negative. Because did I have to get the shot? Did I have to get the shot when I was pregnant? Because if you're RH negative and your baby's not,
I'm trying to remember.
I don't remember. Let's see. V Lady April said, Julie, maybe it's not totally not only hives, just a thought. Like maybe that I've been bit by something? Is that what you mean?
Skin bacteria? What are we thinking? That's what Aardvark said earlier too, is there's a skin bacteria.
Well, there is a skin bacteria, but generally you only get that if you don't have enough chlorine in your water.
Right. And there was no problem with that.
Yeah, and again, the rest of the family did not react. It is very normal for other people to react slightly, and for me to just have a whack out terrible reaction. That is very normal for me.
Oh, good question. Christina Betts, is it best to take milk thistle on an empty stomach or with food?
I have no idea. I have grown milk thistle, and I always saved the seeds, but then I never ground them up and used them. I was more of a prepper than a practitioner at that point. And my body wasn't really overreacting to a lot of things because we were at home. So I saved them, I grew them, and I never really used them that much. So Biddy B. Brown, what do you mean nerves do that too? Are you talking about like a...
Well, if you move back up, I'm wondering if this is the conversation, but Casey Scratch says they don't think you got a nervous habit. That could be the bouncing. So are you bouncing on the ball to relieve nerves, and possibly the nerves are causing this reaction as well?
Like anxiety?
It's all kind of jumping into stuff. Yeah, that tends to be my problem. I work myself up into a state that becomes physical manifestations.
The bee lady
usually do that.
I don't. Usually I'm pretty mellow. The bee lady apiary said, Julie, tons of folks got in a heavily chlorinated pool and got a form of pink eye that was strange.
Oh.
Gotcha. It could be anxiety, I guess, but I wasn't feeling anxious at that point. I don't believe I was. I was feeling pretty mellow.
That was a good week.
It was a good week. We were having a lot of fun. I was keeping up on YouTube videos, so I was handling everything that was being thrown at me, and then I started to itch. The first day I had two little spots that showed up, and then the second day I had another one that showed up somewhere else, and then from there it just kind of, because I still went swimming. Those spots showed up, and then I still went swimming, and I was spending like an hour in the hot tub just sitting there staring at the ceiling. And so it wasn't just like a 45 minutes in there and then out. I was spending like 3 hours in the tub 5 days in a row with the bumps already manifesting. I was itchy a little bit here, a little bit there, and I was still going to the pool.
And it's true.
Yeah, there's food in the fridge.
And it's true that we are also itching.
Yeah, and they are all itching just a little bit.
Oh.
Passing time said, will this be posted after the live is over? The comments won't be. I don't know how to add those. So you'll have to go back in and comment in the bottom.
Have more fun. Julie, you be special, huh?
I know, right? Jill Madigan said, feel better. May I send you Reiki? What is Reiki? Is that like prayer? Yeah. Baby Brown said she looks like she has chicken pox when she's stressed. I get that. Julie, you be special, huh? What do you mean? What do you mean special? Oh, I'm not usually this special. I'm also not usually this whiny. I spent like the whole night last night crying because I was like, why did I do this? Why is this happening to me? Because I haven't had one that I couldn't just get over really quick. I have reactions, but they never last this long anymore. And so I'm feeling very sorry for myself that I don't have it under control and that it's lasting, because usually I just snap right back. I can just get right back in that saddle and go back to work and I'm okay. And I'm not this time.
Go for greens in.
Harshman Hill said, was it a whole body reaction or localized? It's not a whole body reaction. It's localized to different parts of my body. It's worse along my arms like this. I have a couple in my hair where I got splashed with chlorine. Even when I wasn't swimming anymore, I got a little chlorine in my hair, and now I have blisters in my hair. I had some on my neck, but it's mostly healed. I had some on my legs, but it's mostly healed. I had some lower in my trunk, but they're mostly healed. So now it seems to be the spots where I had been wearing the most clothes, that it's like rubbing against my clothes. But it could also be lymph. I mean, this is where you have your lymph. So if I am toxic, it would seem like this is where your lymph drains. And so
Reiki is energy healing, like accelerated guided.
I love that. I would love Reiki. Thank you so much, Jill. How to Homestead with Scarlett Danon said, oh, where did you go? Oh, Traces of Life said it's an attack on your central nervous system, effects of Wi-Fi. I'm sure that probably has something to do with it too. Stuck in this tiny house with all of this computer equipment. Hey, Go for Green Living, how are you? The Bee Lady Apiary said, Julie, have you eaten something strange or new? We have been trying to bring in grain a little bit, just like once a week. We have tried some sprouted grain. We had sprouted rice. We've had sprouted quinoa, but it's been a week in between each time. We did try to eat lettuce for the first time in over a year. We don't eat a lot of lettuce because it used to be one of my prime reactors, because what they sprayed on it. So we did bring some lettuce back in. What else? Have we tried anything else new? We've been eating more nitrates lately than before. Generally, we don't eat a lot of nitrates. But
I have more forces. I will give you some chocolate, but I'm afraid you might explode.
Thank you. Thank you. Do not offer me chocolate. Let's see.
She had that thought the other day. She's like, should I just get in the pool again, or would I just turn into a giant boil and just
would I just explode? Oh, I love that. It sounds right up my mom's alley. It sounded bright. That's reishi different. Okay. See, Rebecca?
Yeah, you're on an hour, huh?
Okay. So there, that's what John said. Harshman Hill said that sounds more systematic as opposed to, or more systemic as opposed to a topical reaction to the chlorine. I know you want to stay away from it, but maybe you should take Benadryl just to get ahead of the curve.
Right.
It would be so nice if I could, but my mom told me. My mom told me not to. My mom was like, you need to just let it work itself out. You're not having the asthma anymore, so don't take the Benadryl and block it. Let it work itself out.
How's that working for you?
It hurts. Cammy's Tiny House Living said, love all you guys' channels. I learn a lot from all of you. I have to get going. Things are getting done. Glad I caught you. Life will better. Thanks, Cammy. Christy Keys said you could try rinsing you in your clothes in vinegar water. Yes, I could, but there would be chlorine in the vinegar water because we don't have a filter on the shower yet. It's a Mystic Farm said, I love swimming, but avoid public swimming pools. They are a cesspool of contamination despite chlorine. Hot tubs are worse. I agree. Susie Max said, well, you look beautiful even if you feel like crap. Thank you. The Bee Lady of Brief said, Julie, love your hair. It's a necessity. Every time it swishes past my body when it's down, it
feels like straw.
It feels like terror. It feels like awful on my skin. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get off now. I'm going to go lay back down in a strange lotus position to try and find some some not hurting.
An advanced yoga.
Right, Jennifer Filia said, just don't get yourself a secondary skin infection trying to avoid the Benadryl. Oh.
Yep.
I haven't taken Benadryl since this last summer.
Which has been, that's a stretch.
It's a really long time. I have not taken it
60
for
days,
so long.
60 days was probably the previous long stretch before that.
I haven't had it for so long. I've been so careful. And I so don't want it back in me. But I'm going to go. And I love you all, and thank you for chiming in and being here with me.
Have a great week.
Have a great week. Hopefully all of you are having better weeks than I am currently. So, love you guys.